In this video, I'm going to go over 3 very easy and quick changes anyone can make to instantly improve their squat depth.
This information will be a combination of research-based recommendations plus my practical experience of being a strength coach and teaching hundreds of people how to squat. We've all heard that adequate mobility is required to achieve full squat depth. But what joints are the most important for squatting to depth, and how can we improve the range of motion at these joints?
The authors of this study tested how much range of motion at the ankle and hips were associated with squat depth.
The main findings were that ankle dorsiflexion explained about 39% of the variance in squat depth in males and 24% in females. Hip flexion range of motion only explained about 5% of squat depth in males, and dorsiflexion strength explained about 9% of the variation in females.
So the main take-home point I took from this study is that limited ankle range of motion can significantly impact achieving squat depth. However, hip range of motion may only play a minor role. Therefore, spending a lot of time in trying to increase hip mobility may not be overly important for improving squat depth in most people. However, range of motion explains less than 50% of the variance of squat depth, meaning there are other factors which are coming into play that affect squat depth, which I'm going to cover in the next 2 points. If you're experiencing joint limitations at your ankles and possibly your hips, here are some research-based recommendations on how to improve joint range of motion.
Performing 1 to 2 sets of 30-second static stretches before squatting can provide an instant and small increase in joint ROM for the specific joint stretched. For the ankles, I suggest using a stretch that mimics the movement performed in the squat to have the best carryover to the exercise, like the one showed in this clip. Here, I'm making sure my heel remains flat on the floor and I'm using the weight of my upper body to push against my thigh to stretch my ankle.
The increase in range of motion from static stretching lasts around 30 minutes and then it returns to baseline. So I suggest stretching your ankles prior to squatting to see if it helps improve your squat depth.
If you're worried about decreases in performance caused from stretching before lifting, it's suggested that performing around 5 to 10 minutes of dynamic stretches after static stretching can mitigate any acute performance decrements. So this might look like doing a circuit of 2 sets of 10 reps of bodyweight lunges, squats and calf raises after static stretching. However, dynamic stretching should not add so much fatigue that you're tired when you get to your squats.
So choose exercises in a volume which does not get you overly tired before squatting.
For longer lasting changes in joint ROM, this review recommends performing 5 minutes of weekly static stretching spread over 5 days for at least 4 weeks to see significant ROM improvements.
So this might look like doing 1 minute of stretching per joint, 5 days per week, either before or after training sessions.
Another way to instantly improve ankle ROM when squatting is just by simply using a heel raise like weight plates under the heels or using weight lifting shoes with an elevated heel.
This allows for more forward knee movement, which can help the hips sink lower, which may allow for a deeper squat. The next variable that can affect squat depth is the anatomy of your hips and how this affects foot placement when squatting.
For the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the acetabulum of the pelvis, which is this little hole here, and the shape of the head of the femur, which is your upper leg bone.
How these 2 bones are structured and insert into one another can affect the squat stance that is best fitted for you. Starting with the pelvis, there are 2 general shapes that people may have.
Looking at the pelvis on the left, the sockets are pointing more forward, so this lifter may be more comfortable with having a closer foot stance. The pelvis on the right, the sockets are more outward, so this lifter may be more comfortable with having a wider foot stance. Looking at the femur, the left one is turned more outward, so people with this shaped femur may be more comfortable with having the feet turned out. On the right, this femur is turned inward. These people may be more comfortable with having the feet facing forward. The makeup of how someone's hip is constructed is important, as using the wrong stance may result in running out of room within the hip joint at the bottom of the squat, which may limit depth.
The different squat stances that can be used are close stance with the toes pointing forward,
close stance with the toes pointing outward, wide stance with the toes pointing forward, wide stance with the toes pointing outward.
But how can you determine which stance is the best for you to maximize your squat depth?
It's pretty simple. Just try each stance and see which one allows you to squat the deepest. If you find that your depth is similar in all stances, then just pick whichever is the most comfortable for you.
Regarding muscle activation of the quadriceps, there appears to be no difference whether you use a close or wide stance in your squats. So you should just pick a stance that feels the most comfortable and allows you to achieve the deepest squat. Now for this next point, I'd say about 90% of people who come to me and say they can't achieve squat depth have this next issue. The fix is really simple and it's just optimizing someone's squat technique. I find for the majority of people who are making either one of the squat technique errors which I'm going to show next, once we fix these, most people can instantly hit squat depth.
Error 1 is shifting too much weight into the toes and squatting into the knees. Looking at this visually, it seems the hips are running out of room and the person gets stuck somewhere at the bottom. To fix this, focus on keeping pressure in the middle of the feet, pull the knees back a little bit, and sit the hips back more. This generally allows the hips to move more freely and allows the lifter to squat deeper. Error 2 is squatting with the chest too high, which puts the back in a hyperextended position, resulting in the pelvis being anteriorly tilted too much. I think what's happening here is this tilted pelvis position is causing the lifter to run out of room within the hip joint, resulting in limiting squat depth. To fix this, avoid raising the chest too high and keep the pelvis in a more neutral position. An easy cue to fix this is to think that you're crunching your abs and bringing your ribs down towards your pelvis. You don't have to do this to the extreme, just pull your ribs down enough that it places the pelvis in a neutral position. I find this correction allows the hips to move more freely in those who are squatting with their pelvis too tilted and generally instantly improves their squat depth.
So that covers everything. If you found this video helpful, press the subscribe button and you'll hopefully be alerted for any new videos I make over the coming months.